department store holding his mother's hand. 15 minutes later, he was gone. It would take 27 years, 2 lost pieces of evidence, and a confession from a dying man for anyone to say, officially, what happened to him. And even then, not everyone agrees they got it right. This is the story of Adam Walsh. Stick around, because by the end of this, you'll understand why a single missing boy from Hollywood, Florida, changed the way this entire country looks for its kids. Before we get into it, like, subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from tonight. I read every comment. Let's set the scene, because you need to see this story the way his mother saw it. It's July 27th, 1981, a Tuesday, noon, in Hollywood, Florida, which means the sun is doing what Florida sun does in July, beating straight down, no mercy. Reve Walsh pulls into the parking lot of a Sears department store. She's got her son Adam in the car with her, and she's got a newspaper ad folded up in her purse for a lamp that's supposed to be on sale. She's been eyeing this lamp for weeks. Adam is 6. He's small for his age, 3'6", and if you ask him, he'll tell you he's proud of that number, like it's an achievement. He's got sandy blonde hair, hazel eyes, and a face covered in freckles. His dad used to joke that if you flipped through a catalog and tried to order the perfect son, you'd end up with a photo of Adam. He loves baseball, he loves drawing. On Saturday mornings, he parks himself in front of the TV for Sesame Street, and he is shy. Not shy in a cute performing way, but genuinely, quietly shy. The kind of kid who needs a minute before he warms up to somebody new. That shyness is going to matter. Hold on to that. They walk in through the north entrance, and almost immediately, Adam sees it, the toy department, and sitting right in the middle of it, glowing under the store lights, a brand new Atari 2600. If you weren't around in 1981, you need to understand what that was. This wasn't just a toy. This was a television screen that talked back to you. This was the future, sitting on a shelf. A small crowd of boys had already gathered around it, taking turns, and Adam's whole face lit up. Reve looked around the store, and by every reasonable standard a parent could use in 1981, this looked like the safest place in the world to leave a 6-year-old for a few minutes. Security guards walking the floor, staff at every register, dozens of shoppers around, and through the window, visible from where she was standing, the Hollywood Police Department. Not a few blocks away, visible, 40 feet across the street. She told Adam she'd be over in the lamp section, just a couple aisles over, and she'd be right back. He looked up at her and said, "Okay, Mommy." Then he turned back to the screen, because in his world, at that exact moment, everything was completely fine. The lamp wasn't on the floor. The salesperson who could check the back was at lunch. Reve left her name and number and turned to head back to Adam. 10 minutes had passed, maybe 15. She walked back into the toy department, and the first thing she noticed was the silence. The Atari sat there, screen dark, both controllers resting on the carpet, and every single boy who'd been standing around it, gone. Not just her son, all of them. Her heart starts going. She calls his name. She checks the aisles. She checks the bathrooms. Nothing. She goes to customer service, and that's when the first announcement goes out over the store's PA system. "Adam Walsh, please come to the front of the store." Nothing. A second announcement. Still nothing. By the third one, the tone in that store has changed completely. People have stopped shopping. They're just watching Reve now. Here's the part that took 27 years to come out. While Reve was walking those aisles calling her son's name, something had already happened in that toy department that nobody told her about. Not that day, not for decades. About 12 minutes after Reve walked away, a fight broke out among the boys crowded around the Atari. 4 kids arguing over whose turn it was. A 17-year-old part-time security guard named Kathy Schaefer got called over to break it up. She wasn't trained for this. She wasn't trained for much of anything, really. She was a teenager working a summer job. She split the boys into 2 groups to get them out of the store. 2 boys she sent out through the north entrance, the same door the Walshes had come in, the side where Reve had parked. The other 2, including Adam, she sent out through the east exit. That door opened onto a completely different section of the parking lot, a part of the lot Adam had never seen in his life. When Kathy asked him if his mom was inside, he didn't answer. And remember what we told you to hold on to, that shyness. A kid who gets quiet around strangers, who needs a minute to trust somebody, does not argue with an adult telling him to walk out a door. He just went. 6 years old, alone, in a parking lot he didn't recognize, because a teenager without proper training pointed him toward the wrong exit. About half an hour later, Kathy heard Adam's name called out over the store intercom, and Sears, the corporation, the store itself, never told Reve what had happened, never told the police who responded that day, never told investigators for almost 3 decades. Internally, it came down to a fear of liability, a fear of getting sued. That silence, a decision made to protect a company, held for 27 years. By 1:55 in the afternoon, almost 2 full hours after anyone had seen Adam, police were finally called. And even with the station sitting in plain view of the store windows, it still took 45 minutes for an officer to actually show up. When Adam's father, John Walsh, made it to the scene after racing there from his office in Miami, the first officer on site looked at him and told him to relax, said most kids just wander off and walk home on their own. John told him flatly, "This is a 6-year-old, we live 5 miles from here, and he has never in his life walked anywhere by himself." The next morning, a newspaper quoted a police aide saying kidnapping wasn't suspected, that the boy was probably just lost. As if a 6-year-old could navigate 5 miles of South Florida highway in July on foot. Now, I need you to understand something about 1981 that most people watching this in 2026 have never had to think about. There was no Amber Alert system. There was no national center that specialized in missing kids. The FBI, by law, could not step in unless there was proof a state line had been crossed or an actual ransom note existed, and missing children weren't even entered into the national crime database that police used to track stolen cars and wanted criminals. When John Walsh later asked a coroner why his missing son wasn't in that database, the coroner didn't know what the database was. Let that sink in for a second. In 1981, we could put a man on the moon, and there was no system in this entire country to flag that a child was missing. Local police departments back then weren't set up to run an investigation like this either. Hollywood, Florida was a small suburban force. They handled traffic stops, break-ins, the occasional bar fight, not a case that would eventually balloon into 10,000 pages of documents and pull in agencies from multiple states. Every mistake that gets made in the first 48 hours of a missing child case is a mistake that can never fully be undone, and this department made several of them before the sun even went down on that first day. John and Reve essentially moved into the police station. They didn't leave for 2 weeks. They set up a phone line in case a ransom call ever came. They printed and distributed 500,000 flyers. The reward climbed. $5,000, then 10, then all the way up past 100,000. Helicopters searched the area. Volunteers walked fields. Truckers passed word along on their CB radios. And still, nothing. Think about the sheer scale of what these two parents were trying to run on their own. With almost no institutional support, John was calling in favors from every business contact he had, handing strangers cash out of his own pocket just to cover their gas money so they could keep driving the search grid another day. Reve barely slept. When she did try to rest, she couldn't stop thinking about the small, practical things, that Adam's feet would be tired, that he'd get cold once the sun went down because he'd left the house in nothing but a t-shirt. Those are the kinds of thoughts that keep a parent standing upright in a police station for 2 straight weeks. Not the big, unbearable questions, but the small ones, because the small ones are the only ones the mind can hold on to without breaking. By day 7, most of the national news cameras had already packed up and moved on to the next story. If this story has your stomach in a knot right now, that's exactly where I want to pause for a second and ask, hit subscribe before we keep going, because it's about to get a lot harder to sit through. On August 10th, 2 weeks after Adam vanished, 2 men were fishing near a drainage canal off the Florida Turnpike, about 120 miles north of Hollywood, almost dark, and they saw something floating in the water. At first, from a distance, one of them thought it looked like a doll's head. It wasn't a doll. The very next morning, the morning after that discovery, John and Reve were sitting on a national television broadcast, on live TV, pleading for the public's help finding their son. They had no idea that 120 miles away, police were already working to confirm an identification. 4 separate confirmations, in the end. Dental records, a visual identification from John's closest friend, who recognized the small gap in Adam's front teeth, the medical examiner's report, and years later, a DNA match from a preserved sample, confirmed against Reve herself. The autopsy findings were brutal in their precision. Adam had suffered blunt trauma, and the medical examiner determined he had died from asphyxiation combined with that trauma, likely within 1 to 2 days of being taken. He had not been kept anywhere. He never had a chance. There was no body to bury, not really. What remained was evidence, and evidence had to be held. So John and Reve stood over an empty casket and buried their son in name only. I want to sit in that for 1 second, because I think it's easy to let this kind of detail slide past you when you're watching a lot of these videos back to back. Try to actually picture it. 2 parents standing over a box with nothing inside it, because the state needed to keep what was left of their child as proof of a crime nobody had been arrested for yet. That's the moment this case should have turned a corner. Instead, it fell apart in a completely different way. Statistically, when a child is murdered, investigators are trained to look closest to home first. So that's exactly where Hollywood police started. John and Reve both agreed to polygraph tests. Both passed. No deception detected. Then there was a man who'd been living with the Walsh family off and on for years. A close family friend who'd moved out just 2 weeks before Adam disappeared. When detectives dug into his life, they found out he'd been having an affair with Reve for roughly 3 years. His first polygraph came back inconclusive. He looked shaken. A second test cleared him. He went through hypnosis sessions with investigators. Eventually, he was ruled out entirely. But by then, the department had already sunk an enormous amount of time and manpower chasing this one man. One officer admitted years later that they pushed him about as hard as they legally could without physically laying a hand on him. Out of 10,000 pages that would eventually make up this case file, a significant chunk of the earliest, most critical weeks were spent on a theory that led absolutely nowhere, while whoever actually took Adam got weeks of head start that can never be gotten back. 2 years later, right up against the deadline, the Walshes filed a lawsuit against Sears, arguing the company had been negligent, that they knew their electronics displays drew crowds of unattended kids, and that an undertrained employee had put their son out an unfamiliar exit without ever confirming a parent was there to meet him. Sears fired back by arguing Reve herself had been negligent for leaving Adam alone in the first place, and threatened to drag every private detail of the family's life into open court to prove it, the affair, all of it. When Sears's lawyers tried to subpoena the still active police files, risking exposure that could tank any future criminal case, the Walshes made the call to drop the lawsuit entirely. They had a bigger fight ahead of them, and they knew it. Over the following years, name after name moved through this investigation. Most were cleared fast. A few are worth knowing about. One man, already in custody for abducting a different child, had a cellmate claim he'd confessed to killing Adam. His car was searched, tested for blood. Nothing usable came back. His employer confirmed he'd been at work the day Adam vanished. Cleared. Another man, later convicted of a horrific attack in Las Vegas involving a machete, bragged in prison about being connected to Adam's case. Investigators eventually got a DNA sample from him voluntarily. It didn't match. He later admitted he'd only claimed it to build a dangerous reputation behind bars. There was nothing behind it. And then there's a name most true crime viewers already know, Jeffrey Dahmer. When Dahmer was arrested in Milwaukee in 1991, and the full horror of what was found in his apartment became public, people who'd been in Hollywood, Florida back in the summer of 1981 started coming forward. It turned out Dahmer had been discharged from the military that March, flown to Miami instead of home, and spent that summer broke, sleeping on beaches, before picking up work at a sandwich shop that ran deliveries out of a blue van. Investigators eventually showed a set of witnesses photographs of 2 men side by side. Dahmer and another suspect police had been circling for years. 7 separate witnesses looked at both photos and pointed to the same face. Every one of them picked Dahmer, not the other man. Dahmer denied it outright. He told investigators that if he'd done it, he'd say so. He'd even welcome the death penalty at that point. He had nothing left to lose. And here's what makes that so unsettling. Dahmer confessed, in graphic, specific detail, to every single one of his other murders. He wanted to talk about those. So why would this one case, out of everything, be the one he chose to lie about? Except we also know Dahmer lied for years, to his own father, to his lawyers, to police, about all kinds of things. He was capable of chilling honesty and capable of ice-cold deception, sometimes in the same conversation. He left Florida less than a month after Adam disappeared. He was never charged in this case. That question mark never really closed. It just got buried under everything else that came after. What makes this angle so hard to fully dismiss is the timing. Dahmer wasn't just vaguely in the area that summer. He was broke, unstable, and drifting through South Florida during the exact weeks Adam vanished, working a food service job that had him behind the wheel of a delivery van most days. That's not proof of anything on its own. Plenty of people fit a rough timeline and have nothing to do with the case. But when you stack it against 7 independent witnesses all landing on the same face, it's easy to understand why some investigators never fully let this theory go, even after the case was declared closed around a different name entirely. In October of 1983, a TV movie about Adam's disappearance aired on NBC. Something like 38 million people watched it. At the very end, the broadcast showed photos of other missing children. The next morning, a detective in a different Florida county got a phone call. The man calling was the same suspect whose photo had sat right next to Dahmer's, the one 4 out of 7 witnesses had passed over. His name was Ottis Toole, a drifter, a convicted arsonist, already sitting on death row for an unrelated murder, already serving 5 life sentences on top of that. And now he was confessing to killing Adam Walsh. Toole and a man named Henry Lee Lucas had been partners, in crime and in a relationship, and together they claimed responsibility for hundreds of murders across more than a dozen states. Investigators had a nickname for men like this: confession killers. Guys who'd admit to crimes they didn't commit in exchange for what amounted to a better day inside. A car ride out of their cell, a hot meal, a little bit of attention. Toole's first confession had real problems. He described Adam in clothes that didn't match what he'd actually been wearing that day. He named Henry Lee Lucas as his accomplice, except Lucas was sitting in a jail cell in Maryland on July 27, 1981. He physically could not have been there. When confronted with that, Toole simply changed his story. Said he'd lied about Lucas, said he did it alone. But here's where it gets harder to dismiss. The number of blows to the skull that Toole described matched the autopsy exactly. He described the body positioned face down, which matched. He described driving north up the turnpike and a wooden footbridge near the exact mile marker where Adam was found, a detail that had never once been made public. And his own timeline placed him, unaccountably, somewhere in South Florida during the precise window Adam disappeared. Police tracked down the car Toole said he'd used, a Cadillac he'd since lost when the owner repossessed it over missed payments. When investigators sprayed the interior with a chemical that reacts to blood, the front and back floorboards lit up. They took 98 photographs of that car. In one of them, in the blood pattern on the carpet behind the driver's seat, there appeared to be the faint outline of a small face. Those 98 photographs sat undeveloped in an evidence locker for 25 years. Nobody looked at them. Not during the original investigation, not during any of the years Toole was alive and confessing, not while there was still a living suspect who could have been confronted with them directly. A retired detective the Walsh family eventually hired, in 2008, was the first person to actually see what was on that film. And the carpet itself, the one physical piece of evidence that could have settled this with DNA once and for all, it had been cut out of the car, tagged, and left in storage, waiting for Hollywood police to come collect it. They never came. The car was sold for scrap in 1985. That carpet is gone, along with the machete believed to be the weapon, which had also been tested early on and had its evidence degraded past the point of any future use. Toole spent the rest of his life confessing and recanting, confessing again, recanting again, depending on his mood, depending on who was in the room, depending on what he thought he'd get out of it. Over the years, he gave more than 24 separate confessions to Adam's murder. That pattern is exactly what made this case so maddening for investigators to actually close. A confession from a man like Toole wasn't the same as a confession from someone with nothing to gain. He'd learned, over years in the system, that talking got him attention, got him out of his cell for a few hours, sometimes got him a better meal than what the prison kitchen was serving that day. So every time he confessed, there was a legitimate question hanging over it. Is this a man finally telling the truth, or a man who's figured out exactly what detectives want to hear? That's the tightrope this entire case walked for over 2 decades, and it's a big part of why nobody ever stood trial for it. In September of 1996, Ottis Toole died in that Florida prison from complications related to liver disease and AIDS. He was 49 years old. Before he died, his niece visited him twice in his final months. And on one of those visits, she asked him directly, point blank, no game left to play, nothing left to gain, did you kill Adam Walsh? And he told her yes. Said he'd always felt bad about it. No jury in the room, no deal on the table. Just a dying man answering a direct question from someone he trusted. John Walsh said afterward that the Hollywood Police Department didn't even know Toole was dying. Nobody from the department went to see him. Nobody was there to hear that confession themselves. In 2008, John and Reve hired a retired detective named Joe Matthews and asked him to do one thing: read every single page of that file, all 10,000 of them. Every interview, every lead, every mistake. He came back with a conclusion. Ottis Toole killed Adam Walsh. The Hollywood Police Department reviewed his work and agreed. On December 16, 2008, the police chief stood at a podium with Adam's parents in the room and formally closed the case. He apologized. For the mistakes, for the lost evidence, for the years those mistakes cost a family that never got to see a trial. John stood up and told the room that after 27 years, they finally had an answer to the question that had haunted every single day since 1981. But here's what I think this story owes you. Straight, no soft landing. There was no new DNA, no trial. Toole had already been dead for 12 years by the time that press conference happened. What closed this case wasn't new proof. It was a formal decision, made by the people who'd failed this family for decades, that they were finally satisfied with what they had. The Walsh family got an apology. They never got to sit in a courtroom and watch a jury deliver a verdict for what happened to their son. Some investigators, to this day, still think the evidence points more convincingly toward Dahmer. The photos that sat undeveloped for 25 years have finally been seen. But the one thing that could have ended every argument, that carpet, is gone for good. Officially, the case is closed. Whether it's actually solved is something people who dig into this file still argue about. Now here's the part of this story that I think people forget, because it's the part that isn't about grief. It's about what this family did with it. 4 days. 4 days after burying their son in an empty casket, while the investigation was still wide open, while nobody had even been arrested, John and Reve founded a center to help find missing children. Not months later, not after they'd had time to process anything. 4 days. In 1982, the president signed a law that, for the first time in American history, allowed missing children to actually be entered into the National Crime Database, the exact gap John had been screaming about to a coroner who'd never even heard of it. In 1984, John co-founded the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Reve was right there with him. She left school. She rebuilt her entire life around this work, alongside him. In 1988, 7 years after that Tuesday in Sears, John became the host of America's Most Wanted. Not overnight, 7 years of fighting through hearing rooms and TV studios to even get that platform built. The show ran for 23 years and helped capture more than 1,000 fugitives, including several names off the FBI's Most Wanted list. In 1994, big retail chains across the country started using something called Code Adam. If a child goes missing inside the store, every exit gets watched, every employee mobilizes, nobody leaves until that kid is found. It's named after a 6-year-old who once walked out a door he'd never used before and never came back. And in 2006, a law was signed strengthening the National Sex Offender Registry and creating a federal child abuse registry, carrying Adam's name. The center his parents built has, to date, helped bring home more than 360,000 children. Think about what that number actually means. 360,000 kids who went home to a bedroom, a dinner table, a parent who got to keep tucking them in at night. Every single one of those recoveries traces back, in some way, to a decision two grieving people made 4 days after they buried an empty casket. The decision to turn unbearable pain into a system that didn't exist yet, because it needed to, because their son had just proven exactly how badly it needed to. He was 6 years old, he was shy. He called his mom Mommy and his dad Daddy. He liked baseball, he liked drawing, and on Saturday mornings you'd find him in front of the TV for Sesame Street. On an ordinary Tuesday, he stood in line behind a few other kids waiting for his turn on a video game, looked up at his mother and told her okay, and turned back to the screen, because in that moment, everything really was fine. 15 minutes changed all of that forever. 15 minutes, a video game display, and a door he'd never walked through before. That's all it took to end one life and, in a strange, painful way, start reshaping how an entire country protects the ones still living. It's worth sitting with how ordinary that Tuesday was, right up until it wasn't. There was no warning sign, no stranger lurking in a way anyone could have spotted, just a busy store, a distracted afternoon, and a kid who did exactly what he was told to do, right up until the moment an adult who wasn't his parent told him to do something else. That's the part of this case that unsettles people most, I think. Not that something rare and monstrous happened, but that it happened inside all the ordinary safety nets a parent is taught to trust. A crowded store, daylight, a police station across the street. None of it was enough on its own. If there's one thing I want you to take out of this video, it's this. Know where your kids are. Teach them it's never wrong to speak up if something feels off. And if you ever see a child alone somewhere they shouldn't be, or an adult acting strange around a kid, say something. Make the call. It might be the one that matters. Tell me in the comments where you're watching this from tonight, and if this one hit you the way it hit me putting it together, hit subscribe. There's a lot more of these cases worth telling right. See you in the next one.